I'm Betty Robinson. It's my 40th year in Baltimore. A good part of it has been as an organizer. Some of it was working in a factory, some of it was working in public health, raising some kids, and now I have grandchildren, and I'm thrilled that there's so much energy, organizing energy happening in the country. So, and I was part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. If anybody knows how many people have ever heard of SNCC? Oh, well, that's good. Okay, so I was on the staff of SNCC for 2 years. So I bring that kind of knowledge with me into the room. So my partner, Dominic.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dominic Moulden, and actually grew up down the street here in Baltimore. But most of my adult life, when you notice, I've been organizing in Washington, D.C., and the group that I organize with is called Organizing Neighborhood Equity, or 1EC. And recently, for about the last year and a half, Betty and I have been coordinating what we call the Ella Baker Organizing Initiative, where we've been doing workshops around grassroots organizing in Baltimore. So we're glad to have you here, and we look forward to having a great dialogue with you.
Turn it over to Dominic for a few minutes.
So this introduction is really part of the teaching methodology that we actually use in our workshop, because we believe that the people's voice is really important. So the way this workshop will take place today will be very engaging, because we're here to learn from each other. So I want to make a couple of points about why we decide to do the workshop this way. So some of you are familiar with this term called popular education. So we believe that popular education is a more democratic way for people to learn. So we want to hear people's stories, their experiences, because that's at the root of how we learn how to organize, because when you organize with people, you learn their history and their story. Also, we believe in participatory learning. So we're going to be doing some moving around, and we want people to pay attention. We want to guide you and be a little disciplined, okay? And what's most important is that we're teaching each other. That's really important for us. So this is not going to be a lecture. All the experience, all the lessons won't come from just Betty and I. It will come from you all, okay? And so as part of this process is a real democratic way of learning and experiencing, but we also need to cooperate with each other. So at certain times you'll see me do this, which means speak up, or we might have to stop people if they're going on too long. Okay? But it's real important for us that the learning takes place with our communicating with each other, with us learning from each other, and us participating in a non-hierarchical form of learning. Okay? Any questions about that? You ready to be engaged, to raise your questions, tell your story, and go on. Once again, you have to move around a little bit too. Okay, so we're going to need your cooperation.
Okay, so this first part is going to be what some people refer to as a spectrum exercise, which I had never heard that term. I've been using this kind of exercise for a long time. But this is agree over here. It's on the table. You can't really see it because it's below. This is maybe, and that's disagree. So what we're going to do is have the people who are sitting in the chairs kind of in front of the signs, kind of move your chairs back. Those people, all of you can stay, your chairs can stay, like from this young lady on over to Spencer and Flint and Ty, if you move your chairs back just so that people can crowd over here by the agree sign. So what we're going to do is read a series of statements, and you're going to go to the place on the floor, either agree, maybe, or disagree, that you're feeling closest to with this statement. And then we're going to ask for some people's thoughts about why they're standing where they are. So the first statement, we're gonna tag team and kind of one do one and one do the other. And there's about 6 of these, and then there's one critical question at the end, and then we're going to do another little exercise. So, okay, so this is the first one. Mobilizing large numbers to be out in the streets is the main thing we need to be doing right now in 2012. Mobilizing large numbers to be out in the streets is the main thing we need to be doing right now in 2012.
Right, so give me your spot, whether you agree,
I'm not wishing
disagree, or maybe, and then we got to talk to each other.
This is agree over here. This is agree over here.
This is agree over here.
Maybe,
This is maybe.
and disagree. And
So
you
where
can-
does the maybe line start?
Well, you can be in between. You can be in between.
Where's the disagree?
You can be in between.
Oh no, some people are in between. That's fine.
Right.
Good.
So, I've forgotten your name, the 30 years in Baltimore gentleman. Tell us why you're standing where you are.
Because we have almost let the movement die. We don't see, I don't even see consciousness among many of the young people. And many of the older people have forgotten purpose.
So visibility in the streets is important.
Yeah, because I used to work in corporate America. There are assumptions made about what they can get over with, and there are assumptions that prove true.
That's really important. Okay, this young lady in the front. I can't see the name tag. Vanessa, tell us why you're standing where you are.
I see the beauty of sort of organizing the streets with something about sort of preparing for that maybe, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about, like what kind of conversations do we have to make that sort of more effective. But that's
Today, what do you think? Why are you there?
I'm thinking, man, I should have been in between.
That's fine. You can move. You can move, by the way, when you hear me. So let me pick another disagree, Adam. Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, you're kind of in
well,
between. Okay.
I just trying to figure out what is affecting organizing right now. And we've seen so many mass mobilizations. I mean, we went to them, and afterwards, like, there's the solid debrief, everybody was really accomplished. But I just feel like that sort of mass mobilization is really romanticized, and rioting is really romanticized, and that it should just be considered like a tactic, a long campaign that, like, yes, we have these like successes, feelings of triumph, but you should see it in the bigger picture of your campaign.
All right, let's take one more agree. Is there somebody who wants?
While we're organizing and thinking, there are others that have dominated the streets and making it very difficult for those who would be our allies to do what we need them to do. I have some disappointment with the Obama administration, for instance. Well, he told us straight up, you got to make me do this. And we went home. And the Tea Party came and hijacked the entire country. So while we're thinking, the heart space is dominating the politics in the inside game. So that's why. Yes.
Well, I think that not having, or having, you can have both and, like, you can have mass mobilization of people in the street, but have that not be your ultimate purpose. Like for the Tea Partiers, their purpose is not demonstrating the street. Their purpose is to change, I don't know, economic paradigm. So they still use that as a tactic.
we're going to go to this question, but does anybody have any questions about how this works? You see how this works now? Okay.
Organizing means reaching people and recruiting them to join your organization so that we can better organize to change the system. Organizing means reaching people and recruiting them to join your organization so we can better organize to change the system. Okay.
All right.
Let's go over here. Are we still moving? All right, let's go with disagree. Pick one.
I guess I would say, oh, sorry. I guess I would say, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be reaching for, like, what makes it organized. So I think that's why I would.
What about the ladies?
That's the same reason I'm a baby. Yeah.
Okay. Agreed. Oh, agreed. Okay.
Tell us.
Plus.
Well, so it kind of relates to the last question in that what I think is important is that there is a clear foundation to build upon. And so that foundation is found in a tightly knit community that shares moral principles. So you really need to invite people into that sense of shared moral principle upon which you can then build a movement that won't stop, that will always fight for what needs to be done.
Anybody want to respond to that? Yes, go ahead.
I think social change comes about through people's self-activity and awareness, and that they need, more so than being part of the perfect ideological organization, to build the capacity to understand and take action in their own interests, and that the best safeguard for a social change movement is that people have that understanding and can guard against being recuperated or distracted from what is in their interests.
Anybody else want to share?
Yes,
Discipling is a great thing, but coordination of everything is imperative.
I was thinking that in terms of if you belong to an organization and you invest some time and energy in that organization, I would think that you would want people to become part of that. And so in terms of your organization, if you're organized and you want to see change, of course you want to invite people in to become part of this mobilization and change agent for the community.
Sorry, in terms of recruiting, in the sense that someone doesn't have to be a part of your organization to be a part of a larger movement. That if there's another group of people that are working on a similar plane as you are, doesn't mean that you have to all merge your organizations. That there still can be a conversation. That doesn't mean that we have to recruit all of these people and stick them into this. That I think that those conversations can still happen where you're having a larger body of people come together, but there can still be individual.
Okay, so here's the next one. Oh, go ahead.
I think organizing is about this.
Okay. Organizing is about the system. In case you didn't hear.
Going back to the last one, when you said organizing I was wondering whether that included some of the organizing, either the logical project, peer-to-peer, which is organizing in fashion, in schools, and something I see maybe starting in areas of written organizing on campus to use the app. So I think maybe what didn't happen for a long time from the 70s, so on.
Oh, I hear you saying that organizing in the streets is complementary to organizing in schools and campuses, workplaces, etc.
Right. And also, in the same vein, organizing in the system, system gain, systemic gain. And then that could start, I think, from the realization that systems have failed us. Systems we have, systems are now in place. Top-down systems have failed.
And actually, that's one of the conditions for some kind of revolutionary change is that the systems aren't working for vast viewers. So here's the next question. When you organize, it is important to have democratic internal structures in your organization. When you organize, it is important to have a democratic internal structure for your organization. And then, since we have so many people agreeing, if you could add, what did you think? What do you see that meaning? Let's take a couple of agreed people. Charles.
There's really more support. In the end, there should be more support for what you're doing. People feel like they have a stake in deciding.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I think that failure comes from failing actually to recognize that each person has a voice. And so, I believe it's important.
I'm in the maybe group because, we call the Western imperialist groups democracy. So it all depends on what you mean by it. I mean, there's representative democracy, participatory democracy, or direct democracy. So that's why I'm in the maybe camp.
That's a good way to
I think that, like, as it's been proven through the history of American politics, like, democracy is often a popularity contest, and so I have been in organizations where things fall apart a little because, like, the most liked or most charismatic person ends up in a leadership position, even though they might not be the best person for that position. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm in favor of consensus. With democracy, which is a form of consensus, but the whole spectrum of consensus, it's like everybody has voice.
Yeah, and I'm kind of piggybacking off of what Charlotte and Hank said, which is it's not the structures, right, and what some other folks said. It's having actually democratic values and virtues and
process
and sort of benchmarks that keep you, because structures come and go and they break down. But if you've got tools that make sure you're staying on track, we got big data. You could theoretically have everybody's voice be heard instantly on everything. So I think that structures are less important than real values and virtues, and then if that happens, building it into the process.
That's a great conversation.
Thanks. One thing I want to mention is that in some of our experiences, there's been a big difference between democratic principles being written on a piece of paper or democratic ideology being discussed. And then the thing that I want to give us fair warning on is democratic practices. So most of the groups that I'm involved with, I don't look for what's on the paper or what we think we believe. I look at how we behave with each other, the relational part of democratic organizing, because we all talk about it, but the practice, especially at the participatory level, it needs to go a lot deeper. I think that's what some of us look at.
Well, I certainly agree.
Could we take somebody who hasn't spoken, because there's a lot of folks, somebody who hasn't said anything, talk about why you're in the agree section? Who's going to step to the challenge?
I was just going to say that I think that the structures, I agree with what you say about the structures
else who hasn't spoken?
I know I've spoken again. I spoke once, but I think it's important that you address the question that's being addressed pretty broadly and deeply. The question of fetishization of process. The General Assemblies and all like that, there's been a lot of problems.
And that's another. I mean, there's also some privilege in fetishizing process because it's who has the time and the mouth and the verbal skills to engage in that. I mean, that was something, if you read the SNCC history, that was a very important dimension in SNCC. What used to happen is we had these marathon staff meetings, and they would go into the night. And at 3 in the morning, the only people who would be left would be the college-educated, passionate political debaters. The rest of us would be asleep or partying or just wiped out, and so the decisions were made in the middle of the night. So even though it was very democratic, people exercised their disinterest in the ongoing process by walking. Go ahead, do you have
Yeah, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
You have more experience. I'm interested in self-organizing structures, and how do you see them falling within this question?
Ooh, that's a big one. I think self-organizing is important, but it's also important to have and I'm not quite sure I know what you're saying, where you're going, but for me, having the power of a large organization or a coalition or lots of people engaged in focusing is also important. So not to take away from either one. Okay, should we go to the next question?
All right. It is absolutely critical to have discussions about race, class, and gender oppression from the very beginning in any organizing we do. It is absolutely critical to have discussions about race, class, and gender oppression from the very beginning in any organizing we do. Over here.
Go ahead. You have to.
I don't know. I don't think it's really necessary. I think that you can right from that get into that down the road. But if you start off with that you're putting your organization in very more narrow focus. And I think when you're just connecting with people, you want to show. You want to show them you are what you're about, not necessarily what you're against. What you have issues with. So I don't think you need to establish, everything that you feel is a deeper facts. Just show what you're standing for first.
I think it's important to have the dialogue of what it is you're about and not prevent that from happening. If that is a voice that needs expressing, you should absolutely support it as soon as it arises. But I don't think initiating that is as important as setting your own mission and describing what your goal is as a group.
I think we had a nuanced conversation even from the beginning. It seems like if those dynamics of race, gender, and class dynamics are present and you don't deal with them, then power that's invisible is going to come out through those different dynamics. And if you don't have that conversation as a group, then certain people, it's easier to see those things for some people than others. So if you don't have the conversation, then some people just aren't going to see the way that power functions.
I think that organizing is about access and about equalizing that access. And if your organizations aren't presenting themselves as accessible, they will not be very should not be like organizing in reactions to things. We should be preventing like a lot of stuff. It's really important. What?
Who's your last comment?
I don't know. I just see it as the most crucial thing that any organization that hopes to stay around for more than a month that have in my experience.
I think that Liz said it's endemic in the system. You can't help but discuss that. I mean, it permeates how relationships, how organizations, how they come together or not come together. But it's palatable, you know. It's right. You can't avoid it. So I think to have an open, honest conversation on all those levels is important, because I think eventually, if you don't, you're going to find out that what you're doing is just surface level, and it's bound to fail. And so to have that conversation up front, yeah.
Or people walk.
Look right there.
People walk and you're wondering, you're looking around the room, all the people of color are gone, or all the gay lesbian folks are gone, or all the women are gone, and you're like, what would happen?
Well, they were never there.
Or yes, they were never there.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Diversity is very important. Everybody has to do the same thing and include their ID in order to make this thing work. Everybody. You have people coming from different communities, you know, and we all here, and our board seems to be heard as well. So, and we want to include everybody. Everybody. And that's the benefit of having an organized team. So all the voices have heard and have been.
Okay.
Yeah, we come from different cultures, so it's good to break down biases and respect.
And if I may just kind of notice the demographics of where, like, who holds this in importance. Like, if I look at, not to point any of you guys out, but disagree is all what I perceive to be white men. And there are white men over there too, but just the fact that there's, like, who's holding that in importance needs to be an important thing to address. If you are more likely to have more privilege, you might not register as much. You know, you're not allowed to have your opinion.
You know, I agree with that. Yeah, my name's Scott. But the reason I'm standing over here is that I felt that was a limited category. You only gave us 3. And then also it was said to be put in advance of any kind of discussion. And so there are invisible barriers as well. So how can we see where things like mental disability fall into the group, right? And so I think we need to be very open with regard to these boundaries that we're beginning to draw.
I just wanted to defend myself. Well, for example, take drones. I mean, you can be a Christian, label yourself a Christian, and be against drones, the killing, the undemocratic killing, and that cuts across all those barriers to me. So that's just an example that I was.
I think my problem was the discussion like from the beginning, and the from the beginning part is like that's the exactly first conversation I'm going to have with someone the moment we're organizing. I think context is really, really important. If I'm organizing a slot casino in a rural county that's 99% white in West Virginia, am I going to talk about how awesome it is that Unite Here is a solidly anti-racist organization, right? I only want to be an anti-racist, anti-sexist, pro-LGBT organization, but it's the very first conversation I want to have about our dynamic, planned, inclusive diversity.
Good point. It does depend on context. All right, so this is the last spectrum question, and then we'll move to a small group activity. So this is it. Leadership development is the key building block for organizing. Leadership development is the key building block for organizing. And these questions have to be black like it right on some level to get your energy up and management. Yeah. Leadership development is the key building block for organizing.
Yeah, always. I like that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I disagree because that depends upon how you define leader. Everybody is a leader. You don't show up unless you're ready to take a position. And leadership development can turn into creation of a nice elite. And so it's about developing the leadership capacity of the people who participate.
I just want to say that I'm over here for precisely I see organizing as empowering everybody. And so developing a leader in all of us is the most important thing. Open dialogue and coming to understand each other's concerns and empowering people communities.
And as the organization changes or shifts, you still have the leaders there to be able to carry the organization forward. So you can be a leader as well as a follower.
I just can't quite get past like calling leadership development the block when it's like I see all these other structural issues as the real block. So I'm over here because I think, you know, I can't
There's a
get
number of
behind that.
different, yeah, there's a number of different building blocks.
We just had this conversation with someone the other day, and it's like there's leadership development, big L, big D, and then there's leadership development, like getting people to actually take a role. That's what I'm
I think it's important to recognize, too, that leaders can be at every level. You know, there can be leaders at every single level, so that it's not a hierarchy. You know, it's flat, a horizontal leadership. You can have leaders all the way across the board.
So another way that this idea of leadership development is used, and that's probably what's behind the way we phrase the question, is that in disadvantaged communities or in oppressed communities, there has to be, so leadership development isn't saying to somebody, you're going to be a leader and we're going to groom you like some of these corporate programs. But leadership development would be studying, would be thinking through issues, would be consciousness raising, would be a broad thing, would be having people understand the connections between the issues, the way the system works, how they can fight, what the strategy is, all of those things which we both feel you have to do consciously, whether somebody is, whether you agree with the assumption, which I do, that everybody can be a leader or that everybody is a leader, there's still an intense process where people grow and learn and understand more about what they're doing, and you have to be intentional about it. That's my opinion.
And some of the people that we work with frame it in this way is that a deeper aspect of organizing, like you said, is leadership development, but is framed in the nurturing of people, especially the people most affected that can't, like they can't come to the meetings. So part of the leadership development process is having them examine their own life and balancing things so they can nurture themselves to be more powerful organizers. And so we, like Kat said, it's transformative organizing, right? So when we don't see certain people there, we don't say that they're not interested. We say, so what is the process to get them there, and what are the roadblocks that are stopping them because they're not being nurtured, right? And life is oppressive, so you need something to transform that situation.
Another key phrase that people have been talking about, and then we're going to go to the next part, but another key phrase is this idea that there's such a thing as transactional organizing and transformational organizing. Transactional organizing meaning the traditional, we want jobs, we want higher wages, we want better vacation benefits, we want street lights on our block, we want the trash to be picked up. So it's looking at the system and saying the system needs to respond to our specific demands or specific complaints, and it's a transactional thing. You demand it, and then if you put enough pressure on them, they give it to you. But transformational organizing is more about values and the things that everybody's been sharing today about leadership emerging, about people thinking about a different kind of way to live. What are the relationships among us and between us? How do we create something different from what we've lived under? And if you want to, one of the things, if you study social movements, one of the things that you learn is that very often the system bent to meet the transactional demands. And then the masses of people were satisfied and they went back to life as usual. So the farm labor movement or the muckrakers movement or the women's movement, getting the right to vote, there's a whole bunch of historical movements that you can look at. So the system bent to, and even the civil rights movement on some level, the system bent, incorporated affirmative action, incorporated the right to vote, eliminated the poll tax, got rid of a lot of job discrimination. But here we are, 2012, and we're back with even worse, I think, corporate control, mind bending, kind of money in politics that we've never seen before, all of that. So transactional, think about that when you're organizing and when you're looking at what you're doing. Is it transactional? Is it transformational? And can you use transactional organizing as a way, as a transformative experience for the people in your organization? How can you use that? Like if your demand is like United Workers uses the demand for, at the harbor, the demands for Portage and GGP to give money for education and a medical fund, it's a tactic that they're using, but they're building an internal transformative culture to really change the system long term.